Hello, this is Marianne, and today we are presenting you episode number 127. That's pretty amazing, right? Yeah, sometimes I can't believe that we have come such a long ways. And today, in many ways, is a new beginning for the Sustainable Living podcast. Remember last week, we introduced Emily. Emily and I were talking for a little bit and telling you what she's all about. This week, we are presenting the first solo show with Emily. Not solo, meaning without me. I guess if I'm not in it, it's solo, huh? So she's bringing you an interview with a builder of tiny homes, and I find it very interesting. And here is Emily.
Hi, and welcome to the Sustainable Living Podcast. I have a really special guest today. This is Ryan Ott, and he is the owner of Midwest Tiny Living LLC. He's based in Minnesota. Ryan brings a lifetime of experience and experiments to the tiny house community. His approach is to custom build homes for the clients he serves, which helps them make the transition in a way that works best for them. This technique, he feels, is the best way to ensure a successful transition from living in a large rooms to living in a large world. Ooh, I am so excited. That bio is awesome.
That's a pretty good one.
So Ryan, welcome.
Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for being here. I am a huge fan. I've had the privilege of meeting Ryan myself. And
yeah, that's right. We did some work with the tiny house people in Burnsville. That's right.
Yes, trying to move the laws forward with zoning. And I've also had the privilege of stepping into one of the homes he's built, which is gorgeous. So, Ryan, welcome, and let's get into it.
Great. That's awesome. Let's do it.
So
where do we start?
Ryan and I have been talking a lot on the sidelines about there's so much confusion about tiny house prices. So you can see prices from $10,000 to $110,000. So I'd really like to dive into, why are there such discrepancies?
Yeah, that sounds great. There's a lot of conceptions and misconceptions, I guess, out there in the tiny house world. You see a lot of online things or a lot of, TV shows and things that kind of misrepresent the true prices of things, of tiny houses, building materials, what they're getting for what they're paying for, and all of that sort of stuff too. And I would say there's really two lines of building a tiny house. There's kind of like a DIY, do-it-yourself build, which is obviously going to be the least expensive way to do it. And then there's the professional build or contractor build, or a build where you actually have to pay somebody to do it because they're taking their time and resources and tools and all that stuff too. So between the two, there's a great expanse of pricing differences, that's for sure. So that's true. That's where we're going to start, right?
So we were talking earlier before we started the podcast about, just materials alone. So when people ask me why my tiny house was around $90,000 once everything was said and done, and nobody could understand why. And I try to explain to them about materials. Materials cost what they cost, especially for someone like me who wants to buy them new to live in it a lifetime. So let's chat about, just for example, give us an example of, just base materials, how quickly that adds up.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great. So what I have, we run QuickBooks. It's accounting software. So we try to plug in everything that we purchase for a house and break it out into sections. So I have a house here. It's a 28-foot trailer. So the trailer itself is 28 feet long, and the house itself is a 32-foot long build. So there's cantilever on both ends. So there's about 2 feet on each end that kind of make up the total of a 32-foot build. So breaking it out, this is what we actually pay for. Now, we don't mark up pricing as far as when we buy building materials to keep our costs down. We don't charge our customers more. We don't inflate the pricing. A lot of times we even drive to the store and pick up the materials for free too, just to try to do what we can, So let's just start off with the trailer. So this trailer for this build, it's a 28-foot trailer, was $7,802.61. That's pretty accurate, right? So $7,800. Let's just keep that easy math numbers for a 28-foot trailer. Now this is a triple axle, 21,000-pound trailer. Fully designed to be a tiny house trailer. It's not a modified mobile home trailer or a modified car hauler trailer or some other trailer that we're going to turn into a tiny house trailer. This was designed for the weight capacities of this specific house. So that's one thing to note. You can probably find a cheaper trailer out there or reuse a trailer of some sort. As a builder, I'm not super comfortable with using reclaimed trailers, especially with the weights that tiny houses are. I think it's more appropriate to buy, a new trailer, it's a foundation, really. It's the foundation of your house.
I've actually seen pictures of tiny houses on the road with a broken trailer, so I agree with that.
Yeah, there was one story. Yeah, there's been a few stories about broken trailers, broken axles, and things like that, which it's just not good. It's not good. So we start off with the new trailer every time, basically. So $7,800, $7,800 for just the trailer, and then on top of that, we start framing. So we have in our QuickBooks here $3,750 worth of framing materials for this particular house. So 37.
And that's wood, correct?
Yep, this is a wood frame, half-inch plywood over a 16 on center stud configuration.
Okay.
So it's all wood, 2x4s, 2x6s in the ceiling, or the roof is made out of 2x6s. So that's $3,750. Let's just keep a running total. $7,800 for the trailer plus $3,750. This includes 2 lofts, so there's 4x4 posts for the lofts beam. So we're at $11,550. That's just for a rough shell so far. I mean, all we have is a trailer. We leveled it out, and now we have some walls in the ceiling. So we're going to move on into kind of like those like the rough in stages. So for the plumbing parts, we've got $1,500. So let's see, $1,500 there is $13,050. Windows and doors. So we've got windows and doors. So now we got some rough in with the plumbing. Now we're going to go to windows and doors. And this house has, I think, 14 windows and 2 skylights. So her window package was $7,250. That's $20,300 for a trailer, some plumbing parts, the windows, and some framing. So it's looks like a shell now, right? Like there's no siding on it yet, there's no roof on it yet, but we're at $20,300, and you can't really live there yet.
And now this is without your labor costs.
Yeah, this is not me building it yet. This is just material costs. So let's get into where are we going to go next?
The insulation, I think we said was.
Yep. So insulation. So this build it's a co-build. So it was part builder built and then part DIY built. So we did a lot of the stuff, but our client handled a lot of things as well. So when we insulated, the base insulation was $1,500 just for like the under trailer. This is all spray foam insulation. So it's a closed cell spray foam insulation, about R7 per inch of thickness, and we insulate the whole floor down through the trailer. So it stays as warm as you can keep it in Minnesota's negative 20 degrees. So let's add in that. So we have $21,800 with the installation. Let's see here. So roofing materials, we've got, this is siding and roofing together. It's about $4,900 for the roofing and siding.
And the roofing was tin.
Yep, it was a standing seam steel roof.
Okay, steel, okay.
Yep, and then steel siding from a local manufacturer, Edco steel siding. So steel roof, steel siding.
Okay.
And that was $4,900. So we're at $26,700. And then we get into, some of the interior finishes. We've got millwork and trim was $1,000 for this particular one. And that does not include, she actually purchased herself all of the interior wall. She did tongue and groove pine on the interior. So all of that stuff she purchased. I don't know specifically how much it cost, but I'm sure it was in that $1,000 range or, plus or minus. So we got that. And then what else do we have here? Like I said, it was kind of a dual build, so it doesn't have all of the stuff. Oh, this is a great one. So originally she was going to do white walls. So she's going to do a tongue and groove pine interior and then paint it all white because she really liked the way that looks, right? It's beautiful and it's clean and bright in the inside. As she was putting up her walls, she was like, this wood is too beautiful to paint over. I just can't do it. So as it turned out, I needed to paint it or clear coat everything on the inside. So we clear coated, and just the clear coat alone, just the materials for the clear coat was $872 to put 3 coats of clear coat, so it would be a nice finish. It would be washable and durable for a long time.
Right.
So $870 for just the clear coat finish on there. So I'll just add that 870 in here. So we're at $28,570. That doesn't include the $700 paint sprayer that I have, or the time that it took me over multiple days to do it and let it dry. All the rest.
Well, and we're not even to the appliances yet. I mean,
yeah,
you can see how quickly it adds up.
Yeah, so we're at $28,570, and that's basically a completed shell. So that's got windows, roof, siding, doors, some interior rough-in plumbing. I know the electrical was $2,700. We hire out the electrical.
Yep.
So that was $2,700 for the electrician to come in and do their stuff. And we had a plumber do some plumbing, which was $778. In all total of the stuff that we did was $32,502 in material costs on this build.
Yeah.
$32,502.39.
Right, and that's not including a toilet or the wood-burning
Yep.
stove or the AC
Yep.
heat unit or the refrigerator or the oven and stovetop
Yep.
or the sink.
Yep. Or the cabinetry. So she paid somebody else to do the cabinetry as well. So
Right,
her whole
right.
kitchen, she built her own countertops. So her sink, her stove, her refrigerator, her bathroom vanity. She actually has a clawfoot, like a clawfoot tub. Is that what that is in there?
Yep.
Washer. She has one of those, kind of a hand washing machine. I don't forget what it's called.
Yeah,
where
I think
wash
it's a
it and then
Panda
spin.
or something. Yeah,
Yeah. So I would imagine on her end, she probably has. I'm just going to take a guess. It's probably $10,000 to $15,000 more.
Oh yeah.
In just material costs. I'd never really. Sometimes I do my part, and then if they need me to do more, I can do it. But I don't always get into their own finances necessarily either.
So then you get into this bigger question of building your own versus professional. So what would be perhaps obviously the benefits of doing yourself is you are going to save some costs on labor, but obviously there's benefits to having a builder do it as well. So, or maybe like in your case, it was a team effort, and in my case, it was a team effort. So, yeah, can you speak to that just a little bit as far as like, yourself versus pro?
Yeah, for sure. Like if so, there are so many benefits between the two. If you're going to DIY your house, I think that's an amazing thing, because as you go through it, there are these ups and downs, and there's this learning process. And when you get through all that, definitely take a couple of massages through the whole process, because it's stressful, that's for sure. Go through that whole process, but when you're done and you're sitting on your couch, or you're laying in bed, or you make a meal, you can look around at that little nail that maybe you didn't put in quite right, or that piece of trim that's just off. You wish you would have cut it different. But you have all these memories, which are amazing memories for the DIYers. Absolutely wonderful. And there's price advantages. It just takes the cost of the material itself. But what a lot of people don't factor in is the cost of tools in there. So, you probably have, a rough guess of $3,000 to $5,000 worth of tools that you need at any one time. Right. You can get by with maybe a little fewer, and it's really nice to have more. The quality of the finished product is kind of based on the quality of tools, really, too. So that's an estimate that's kind of a little bit tricky to pinpoint, but not everybody really thinks about that. So DIY build is definitely, there's value in it, because you get your own kind of personality in your build. But the finish, unless you're very good, might not be a perfect finish, So the result, it might be kind of shoddy. There might be some questionable areas where you're like, I don't know really how to secure this properly. And you see those stories online too, like we were saying with the trailer that broke. Overestimation or underestimation of abilities kind of turns into potential for danger. And then as the movement goes forward, that's kind of one of those things that's kind of always questionable. Where on the builder side, I'm a licensed contractor in Minnesota, so I can build a regular full-size house. So all of the knowledge and the things that I've gained over the last 20 years in building, I can apply towards tiny houses. So that's practical knowledge of understanding, how materials work together, where I've seen them fail, where I've seen them work just over the course of my life, as well as all of the training and continuing ed credits and books that I buy. I'm constantly buying books just to perfect my craft, just to learn more. So I'm kind of constantly educating myself. So just personal knowledge, there's a lot of time and investment in actual physical dollars learning what I'm doing. But then on the business aspect, then we have all of the business things that need to be taken care of too, because we are ultimately liable for what we're building for somebody. So we have to make sure that we have insurances in place and a building to build it in and all of the proper things that are really going to allow us to continue building and to contribute towards this market. I feel like, my role in this is really to help people get into a home. So I grew up, my father passed away when I was little, so it was just my mom and my sister. And somewhere along the line, she was able to buy a small house. So I grew up in a small house. I think it was like 900 square feet or something. This is a 3-bedroom small house. So I have this experience of living in a small area, right? But my mom bought that house. She owned it. She didn't rent. She rented for a few years when we were young, and then she bought into this plan. And quite a few years ago, I was talking to her about that, and she's like, why did you buy this house, or what was the thing? And she's like, I knew I needed some stability for my kids. We had this hardship. We got through that. She's a very strong lady, and she knew that to give kids the best chance, you have to have some stability. And she felt that was through home ownership. That's how she saw that. And I think that kind of stays with me. And being a builder throughout the years, I've built the standard split entry house. Around here it's $250,000, $300,000 or something like that. It's getting up to be. It's a standard split entry house, and it just gets so boring. And I feel like those houses aren't really necessarily doing what they need to do for home ownership. The pricing of home ownership is getting out of hand, and that's kind of what leads into this movement. But
Right.
My part in it is I can really help people get into, that stability. Even though it's on wheels and you can move it around, it's still your home no matter where you go.
Right.
It's your room and it's your space. And whether or not you have kids, just your personal belongings in a space that's always yours I think that's magical for people. I think that's really important. Whether that's in a bus or if it's in a tiny house or if it's, we're an RV camper or whatever it's going to be. I think that's where I see this movement and why it's so important for me.
No, I so appreciate you saying that, because I think, it really comes down to, for me at least, this movement comes down to affordable housing. And
Yes.
there's so many people that don't have it, and affordable is different for everybody. And I think that is the beauty of this movement, is you can do it yourself. Or in my situation, I was like, yeah, right, I'm going to burn my whole family down. I need a professional. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I didn't want to deal with the time, and I wanted it to be done well. And I think something I want to touch on quick is you did mention hiring an electrician and a plumber. And I do appreciate you saying that. And I think just for the DIYers, I think, again, it's very admirable and it's wonderful. But electricity especially, I would highly recommend hiring out.
Yeah, so I have wired a tiny house completely.
Wow.
My own home repairs. I understand electricity, but for me on my end, the plumbing and electric, these guys have vans full of parts and pieces, and tiny houses are so kind of abstract that not everything works the way that you want it to. Where these guys can jump in there in 2 days, they're like, oh, it's done, and I was like, this would have taken me.
Right.
So for my client side, I feel like it's best just to hire that out. Because it's way less expensive than having me, painstakingly go through and be like, okay, this one goes there and that one goes there. Because these guys do it. And then the other thing is too, the reason that my father passed away is because he got electrocuted to death. So I'm sorry for taking this in that direction, but so electricity and me are not always friends, and I feel like I respect it more than maybe some others, and I would like to just leave that to the professionals. So that's. And I don't want to, they add in the smoke detectors and CO detectors, and they get as close to residential IRC codes as possible as they can inside these tiny houses. So I know that it's done right. I know that their house isn't going to burn down, or it shouldn't burn down, all of those things. So
there's always user error.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you're overloading circuits, and there's many ways of things going down, but. Yeah, I think that's one area that I definitely like to hire out. And I think, the DIYer certainly can. There's enough tutorials online, but that's something Water is a little bit less important in my mind, but electricity is very important to kind of get that right. Especially these tiny houses, you're plugging them in and unplugging them from different various locations, and to make sure that's all set up right.
Right, the
From
right
the get
ampage and yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that's a deep hole to go into.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's way over my head.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something that I definitely, and you know, like I said, cost savings to my client. It's saves them money by me slowly motoring through it versus them just coming in and doing it right the first time.
Well, you had mentioned, the different kinds of living small. We consider, tiny house, I think, is usually considered, on a trailer. It looks like a house. It feels like a house. And there are other options out there, like you mentioned, like buses and mobile homes. And I often get the question when we were building our tiny house, we always got the question of why not just get a camper? And I have my own personal feelings about that because I live in a camper right now after living in a tiny house, and I am trying to be really upbeat about it. But I would like to hear from a builder's perspective, why is a tiny house, a great option for people versus like an RV camper, especially when you're considering us being Minnesotans, but, just in general.
Yeah, I've got a great story for this. So I was in Iowa at the Midwest Tiny Fest show in Iowa this last year. I actually had a chance to sit down with Mr. Jay Schaefer for a long time, and he was telling us about his first tiny house was an Airstream camper. He lived in an Airstream. Like that was his first experience in the early 90s or somewhere in the 90s, right? So as he was explaining, he's like, so it was so cold in Iowa, and I had to crank up the heat, and the heat creates moisture. So the inside of my windows were I had to take a scraper and scrape off my windows and the inside walls of my camper because there's no insulation in campers, right? So he's like, I couldn't live like that anymore. I needed something that resembled more of a house. And what's interesting about that story is like, yeah, RV campers probably work for the Sun Belt, maybe coastal, something like that, where you've got good weather usually, but pretty much anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon line or, any further in than California, when you start getting to the mountains, you've got to deal with heating and cooling and, this temperature fluctuation, where an RV camper is designed for recreational use. I'm not saying, yeah, for the climate, for the summer, where tiny homes are a regular house built on a foundation that moves. So RVs have their challenges. When you deal with cold and you heat it up, you create moisture, whether that's your own body or whether that's the heating source, and that creates moisture in your home. So then you add cold coming in from the outside with little amounts of insulation that's going to condensate on your walls or your windows or wherever it's going to land, and then freeze because you don't have. So then you crank up your heat, which creates more moisture, which then condensates more, and it's just like this never-ending cycle. The next thing to do is you get some kind of heat ventilation recovery, or you get like a humidifier controller, which sucks out that. But now you're sucking out warm, wet air and replacing it with cold, dry air, which you have to heat again. So that, which then you have to raise your heat. So then you add more wetness, moisture into the air. It's like this. It's a circle. So without proper insulation, you're going to end up having troubles with sustainably living in a house in inclement weather areas. It's kind of the same in the summertime, but it's opposite. You got to cool that down. Unless you like the heat, that's fine. Yeah. But when you cool it down, you also it takes the moisture out of the air, and then you have kind of your windows sweat because it's cold inside now. Instead, they don't freeze, they sweat because it's hot outside and cold inside, and now that condensation is on your windows again, which then creates vapor, and that can end up in your walls and stuff like that too. So so RVs, depending on where you're living, people have been living in RVs for years. I mean, ever since RVs were invented. For surely, my grandma used to go to Arizona and live in an RV for 9 months out of the year, and she'd come back for a couple of the nice months in summer, and then head back down there. So there's nothing. I'm not going to say anything that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, that's awesome. It's inexpensive too. I mean, you can get into them, but anywhere that's not, coastal or pretty mild throughout the entire year is not the appropriate choice for full-time living, in my opinion.
Yeah, I so appreciate you saying that, because we've been in our camper for 2 months and we already have mold. We have a
Yep.
little mini dehumidifier, and yeah, I mean, it's especially after being in a tiny house and not dealing with mold, and we barely, we had an air filtration system, and we had the wood burning stove that would suck out any moisture, and it was perfect. But yeah,
Yeah.
I can definitely speak to the mobile home, and obviously we will be building another tiny house. But I also,
Yeah.
I mean, financially, yeah, the mobile home was quick and easy, and
Sure.
we got it. But we're definitely dealing with mold and insulation and freezing. And I can tell you the cost you're going to spend on heating and cooling your RV are
Yeah.
going to definitely end up wasting you way more money than buying a tiny house that is well done, well insulated. I mean,
Yep.
we in our tiny house, I think our electric bill was very minimal, and
Yeah.
we use wood pellets in our
Right.
pellet stove.
Yep.
And I mean, we've spent about $40 to $50 every week for our camper in Minnesota. Yep, on propane.
Yep.
It's insane. The difference is insane. I mean, we're going to end up spending more with this camper, but we're moving to Colorado because, like you said, we need more mild climate until we can save up for the next tiny house. So yes, everything you said, yes, yes, and yes. But again, we have great friends in Colorado that live in mobile homes full time, and they are loving it. And if that's your vibe, go for it. Like, absolutely. But if you're looking for a home, you step into, the tiny house you built, you've got 13 and a half, is it 13 and a half foot ceiling, right? At the top?
Yeah. On the outside. Yep.
So, I
From
mean,
the
it's
ground.
that huge space. You walk into a camper, and for me, when I walk into a camper, I feel like I'm in a den.
Yeah. So, like human scale, if you think about like human scale, when you walk into a room like an older house that has 9-foot ceilings, the room might still only be 10 by 10 or something, but you're like, oh, this room is so big. It's just because you have volume above you.
Yep.
The floor space might not be any room, but if you have a 7-foot ceiling, you'd be like, this is a cave. I don't like this,
Let's dive into the regional differences. So everyone's always, they're searching. Let's say, okay, I'm starting my tiny house design in my head. I've got this design. I'm really excited about it. Now I'm starting to look for a builder. So why are there such discrepancies? And I would also, if you can touch on also, if you do get a builder outside of your state, what that means in the end, because you have to get it to you. So.
Yes. So let's start with the builder outside of your state or outside of your zone. The client that I was referring to with the pricing that we were kind of going with, they were looking at a company out of California, and they were going to go with that company, but they were kind of concerned that they didn't have, hands-on, or they couldn't go see their tiny house. We're in Minnesota, they're in California, and they didn't want the cost of going back and forth. And there's pictures and things like that, but it's not the same thing when you can walk into it. So that's one thing. And as I was reviewing the California tiny house build sheet, we were kind of comparing what was going to happen, because she decided that she didn't want to go with them, wanted to go with somebody local. So we were just kind of going over what she already had planned out. And through that process, I found that they were going to put like R11 in the floor for insulation and R11 in the walls. Well, in Minnesota, you need to have R49 in the ceiling and R21 in the walls as part of our code, just because of the temperature. So in California, that tiny house would have been great. In Minnesota, like you, Emily, and your heating bill would have been outrageous. I mean, this thing would have been inefficient for Minnesota for sure. So touching on the concept of somebody building outside of your zone or outside of what you are familiar with, they may not understand what's needed for building where you're going to be. And there's not a complete silver bullet when it comes to building, because every zone has kind of a different way they approach some things, moisture control, heat loss, and all that stuff. But my suggestion is to find somebody that's familiar with where you're going to be the most of the time. So that's one thing, going to like the pricing and having different pricing variables. I was reading an article in a home builder magazine, and this is for regular houses. And they were talking, there's a builder in North Dakota and Minnesota. The two states touch each other, Fargo-Moorhead area. And he can buy the exact same price lot for $60,000, and he can build the exact same house, square footage, layout plan, and all that stuff in the two cities. But that same house, because of Minnesota's energy codes, is going to be $17,000 more expensive than the exact same house built in Moorhead because he has to do more to it. Now it's the same climate, it's the same everything, just a river separates the two difference. So that's not talking about like employee, the hiring people or anything like that, just the wages itself, but just energy codes on that level of building a regular house, there's a $17,000 difference. So over time, your house costs more. It's going to cost more over time because you have a loan on it. You have a mortgage, which is going to make you pay twice the price of your house when you're done with it anyway, and all that stuff. And then there's regional things. I know that my friend worked for Home Depot or works for Home Depot, and he was in Kansas. And you can build a house in Kansas slab on grade for maybe $100,000 or $120,000, where in Minnesota you could never do that. You could never build a house for pretty much less than $200,000. That's as low as you can pretty well go. But then the cost of living is lower in Kansas, and the cost of wages are lower. For instance, in Kansas, and this holds true in a lot of areas where the cost of living is lower, the cost of wages are lower. The whatever kind of workers you can find, maybe high paid or low paid workers, or however that's going to work. So if you go to an area where it's like New York City, where the cost of living is sky high and people need to make a certain amount in order to do that, those workers are going to need to make more, which is going to cost you more.
Right.
Or if you go to somewhere else that's less expensive, that can attribute to that. So like the same house built in Kansas, let's say, or New York City, or downtown LA, there's going to be probably 3 different prices.
Yeah.
But the benefit of that is that there are on wheels and you can move it around, but there's also costs in moving them around. So you might suck up all of that by transporting a house. Maybe it costs lower in the first place, and maybe they do understand how to build it for your area. It's going to cost something to transport that unless you can do it yourself.
Yeah, and actually we're in the process of selling our tiny house because we found out that for us to hire somebody just from here to Colorado, each time we do that, it's about $2,500 to $3,000, and that was on the low end.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not cheap to be hauling these things back and forth. I mean, it's cheaper than obviously a house, and a mortgage, which is why we're doing it. But you want to make sure you research what size you want for your tiny house, what purpose you want. We did not do enough research. We were like, we're just going to like sit on this land forever. And then we got the travel bug, and we're like, wait a minute. We're going to build a really small tiny house.
That's something that should be kind of qualified, too, with this conversation. I know your house is, what, a 28-foot house? Is that right? Your tiny house? 28 foot with 2 lofts and a full staircase and a full kitchen and a washer, dryer.
Oh, yeah. It was probably around 20,000 pounds once it was full.
Right. Yeah. So you have this, it's a home. I mean, this thing is solid. It's like built well. Exactly. So, and that's, this other build that I was saying, that's 28 feet long, 32 finished. These tiny houses are not necessarily road tiny houses. You can move them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
We moved it 3 times.
Exactly. It's not a problem to move them. The further you go, the more expensive it's going to be. But but if you're really looking to build something that's going to be, you're going to travel with a lot, you really have to be conscious of what you're trying to accomplish. And anything that's getting bigger than maybe 24, 26 feet, anything that's bigger than that, you're getting to the area where you're not going to have a normal truck pull this thing around. It's getting to be a bigger vehicle, which is more expensive and all that stuff too. So yeah, the expense of just moving them can be great if you're not pre-planning some of that stuff and have that in mind.
Which would be another benefit of going with a more local builder. Yeah. But you can also, it also depends on what you want, right? I know for you, you're an experienced builder, right? So you get what you pay for, really, essentially. Yeah. So in the end, you want to, kind of do some research, find out, look at the ones they've built, look at what they're available. Can you speak to us about how I know your business is starting to build kind of some design ideas and how you go about helping people get from I want a tiny house to here's my design, this is what I want. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so for us, our spiel is we are a custom designed home builder, and we build tiny houses. We don't build build RVs. We don't build with RV certifications, although we do follow some of the rules, some of the crossover rules between the two. So we try to build as close to the IRC, the residential code, and the RV code where it applies, because there's kind of like this mesh of the two. And we really believe, like, our philosophy is, if you're going to live in something that's like 200 square feet, it really needs to be designed around you and the way you live. Because some people like a kitchen, and some people like a bathtub, and some people want, a lounging space. And I've seen some really poorly executed designs, and I've seen some really good stuff out there. But what happens when you go into an RV, you have, your choice of 3 different cabinet finishes, and everything is laid out. And that's one of the drawbacks of kind of living in a tiny, or one of the benefits of being able to live in a tiny house, is that you can design it yourself, and you can make it the way that you want it. So that's kind of the way that we kind of overview, and we have some layouts and some plans that you can kind of choose from, or you can choose from. It's not kind of, but when we bring a customer in, we kind of explain that, you really want to take a look at the way you use your life now, the way you live life. And you take a minute, take a couple of days, and really process how you live in your kitchen. Like, are you using the refrigerator a lot? Do you have a lot of stuff on your countertops? Do you use one specific pan over, or are you using the entire sets of pots and pans? And how often are you doing that? So then you go into the bathroom, and do you bring your clothes to your bathroom first, or do you just dry off with a towel and then go to your bedroom and change? And some of those things, really kind of break down how you live in your life now, and where it's efficient and where it's deficient. So some people only sleep in their bed, and some people watch TV in their bed, right? So that's their living room and their sleeping area. And we want to understand how that works for you, so then we can build a house around the way that you really like to operate, just naturally. So then when we kind of figure that stuff out, then we go through the plan, and a lot of times that's just hand sketches, because real rough sketches narrow things down at the beginning, so you can start to understand how this flows with that and where that's going to go. Because designers are expensive, and software is, it's expensive, and it takes work to put all that stuff in, where you can just rough sketch things out for a while. And then once we get that rough sketch, we say, okay, this is the way it looks, this is how we want it, and then we bring that to the designer, and then they can scale all that out. And then they can say, yeah, you're not going to get that tub with that bathroom. It's just not going to work. And obviously we have a good idea of how that works, and then we can build that, into scale. So we have a scale model, and then from there we can start price quoting and kind of understanding fits and finishes, and, cabinetry, and the design details, as far as like the finishing details. And then once we have that quote situation, we can go through and adjust our allowances, or make some changes, and then that's when we start building. And then we build it. So far I build by myself, with the exception of some subcontractors that come in and help. And then my son helps. He's 19 now, and he helps occasionally. And my wife does. If I don't say this, my wife helps too. She comes out to the shop and things. And then Stephanie, who is one of our past clients, decided that, she loves the movement, and she lives in her tiny house, and she just believes in it so much, like I do. Like, this is the way of the future, and this is where I need to be. This is where she needs to be. So she helps through that design process too. Actually, most people talk to Steph. They don't really talk to me, because I need a hammer in my hand.
Yeah.
To keep going. So that's our process, kind of concept. Think about how you live, what you do, what you don't do, where you really need the stuff, or how you'd like to change your current situation. And then start sketching that on a piece of paper. And anybody can do this. This is, this is super, super easy for anybody to do. Just start designing it in a serious way. The closer you can get your tiny house to kind of correspond with the way you live now, I think the more successful you're going to be in your tiny house. If you have this dream of a big kitchen, but you never cook, it doesn't make any sense. You're going to have like this wasted space, right? Like, just be really kind of aware of who you are just when you go through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that you guys are spreading that information, because we spent a year coming up with a design, and that all the design in the world didn't really matter until we did what you said. We sort of like played in our house. Like, first we downsized and tried to live in a little bit of our house, and then actually visited several tiny homes, and I think that's a huge piece. And I know
Yeah.
you do that as a company, and I know you tell people get
Yeah.
in a tiny house. And I would
Yeah.
even recommend get in a tiny house, get in a camper, get in as many
Yeah.
things as you can, and
Yep.
sort of figure it out. Like, okay, yeah, that I like that, I don't like that, and that can really. I think we watch these shows, and the camera angles and everything, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh wow, and that's I want that, I want that, I want that, and then you actually step in there and you're like, well, that's not practical. Oh, that doesn't work
Right.
for my family. So
Yeah. 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 It sounds great to have, what's an example? A bathtub, right? I always dream of this big, huge bathtub, but you take a bath twice a year. Well, I mean, it's kind of impractical then to have that. It's just a cost that is not going to really do you good. Really, I kind of tell people build to the 98% of your life. So you build to 98%, and there's always Thanksgiving where you're like, there's 20 people that are going to come over. That's one day a year, right? So what can you do? You can rent out the Holiday Inn Convention Center, or if depending on where you live, you can put up a tent, and there's there's ways around that function just as well as having 20 people in your house, which your house might accommodate that, but that's that 2% of your life that really is an extravagance that doesn't really fit into the tiny house movement necessarily, and just build to your 98%. That's my suggestion.
yeah, and actually that brings up a really good point. Is there's even within the tiny house movement, there's this whole like luxury tiny house versus like put together tiny house with used
Yeah.
materials. And I guess from my perspective, I think there's a place for all of it, because my goal, and I believe your goal, is just affordable housing. Let's get people in these
Mm-hmm.
houses they can afford, and home ownership and sustainability. So
Yeah.
it is interesting. I'm like, everybody was welcome. Everybody come on in. Like, just, let's make this a
Yeah.
bigger and better thing. And
Yep.
I think sometimes, you see these luxury houses, and hey, to me, I say awesome, because then that's going to encourage more people to live affordably
Yeah.
and
For sure.
sustainably. But at the same time, I would say, hey, I'm going to try to accumulate as much used items as I can, and sustainable items for
Yep.
my next tiny house. But at the same time, like you said, I mean, you got to think about mold, and how is it going to last? Are you going to have to replace that? So, I think there's definitely a place for both, and hopefully it'll continue to be a mix of everything. But I think luxury and used and all of this all has a place in the movement.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I think everybody's, design aesthetic is one thing. Everybody, not everybody wants to, they don't like steampunk, stuff, and not everybody likes, high modern design necessarily. Some people like a cabin feel, and some people want it to be, really plain. And, so there's like all of these different things that happen within it. The biggest thing is to build a safe home for you to live. And to be able to experience life in a potentially a better way than you could have. One of the things that's happening in my city here is they keep putting up apartment buildings, and there's like these, 100-unit apartment buildings, and people are paying $1,200 or $1,400 a month for these 2-bedroom apartment buildings. And I think, oh, that's great. People can live somewhere, but there's these groups of owners that own these apartment buildings, and they're extracting this $1,400 a month from people. Those people will never have home ownership. They will always pay that. Where if you buy a tiny house for, even if it's $60,000 or $70,000, 10 years later it's going to be paid for. So now the next 10 years, you're going to live till you're 80, no matter what. So you buy a tiny house when you're 30, you pay it off by the time you're 40, and you got 40 more years without a house payment. It's like, it's instead of paying some group of people that can put up this apartment building and then paying them until you're 80, you're going to live until you're 80. I mean, that's just the way it is. So you have to start preparing for that, or planning, or see it that you're going to do it. So you got to start today on one, and just this sustainable living and building a good place to live, and learning about your own home and all that stuff too that comes with this. It's just, I can go off on a tangent sometimes.
No, that's beautiful.
So important. It's so important.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because we looked into apartments. We looked at all the options, apartments, townhomes, but when something isn't your own, we have a tendency not to take care of it quite as well, and kind of do the bare minimum. And you also don't have that freedom to customize like you would in a tiny house. And we've done it all. We've done mobile homes, we've done campers, we've done tiny house, we've done big house, we've done apartments, we've done studios, and when you're living with a bunch of people and you don't have control over your situation, for us,
Right.
and
Yep.
again, it's about options, right? Some people
Yeah.
love that feel. Some people
Yeah,
love
for sure.
apartments and townhomes, but
Yep.
why I think tiny houses need to be one of these options because it
Yes.
provides home ownership. You
Yep.
can still have a plot of land. Everyone's like, "Hey, go park in a mobile home," and it's like, well, a lot of mobile homes, I can't let my dog out. I can't have chickens.
Right.
I can't have a
Yeah.
garden. So
Yeah.
that is, we only have about 15 minutes left, but I'm gonna ask it. I'm gonna regret it. But Ryan, where do we park? You build me this home, but where do I
Yeah.
park?
Yeah, that's a serious. So my clients so far are mostly in Minnesota. They're kind of a little bit hidden, a little bit out. There's so much property out there that people never see. Is it necessarily legal or illegal? That's always like this contention. So where do I park? We see a lot of success in RV parks, right? That's where a lot of people end up because it's typically the easiest point of entry. We see people just doing it, asking for what is it? Ask for forgiveness versus
Yeah.
ask for
That's what we
that's it.
do.
Which is you it's kind of a little bit scary, but that's kind of the adventure of life too. And your house is on a trailer, so then you can pick it up and just move it. Jay Schaefer kind of talks about civil disobedience when he talks because why are the laws the way they are is just because, oh, this is a great one. So the law of the land is made by the people of the land.
Exactly.
There was not a rule that there was stoplights before the cars. We didn't decide that, so cars came first, and then they were like, oh, we need a way to make sure that people know how to drive. Oh, let's make driver's license. Okay, got it. So hundreds of drivers, now we have thousands of drivers probably. Now we have driver's license. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, good. And then they're like, oh, these people are just driving around the streets like crazy people. Let's make some roads for them, like, separate. Let's make some stop signs. Let's slow them down a little bit. So that's the same thing. We have early adopters in this movement that are like, I understand that there's no law, but there will be because there has to be. So we need all of the if it's beyond your comfort zone, I'm not saying that you should just go fly in the face of whatever laws are out there. But if it's in your comfort zone to be an early adopter into a movement that is absolutely no longer it's on the precipice of being the way it is. If it's not already, I don't know. We need early adopters that just can stand up to the current laws, the way they are written, and make those changes. And you and I have helped with that. We sat in the city offices and spoke at the meeting, and they decided to make some kind of change in their community, which is great for us. And we're doing that. And that's the stuff that's important. We need more people to do it, so then more people will notice it, so then more people will have to make law changes. And there's going to be a group of people that hate it. There's a group of people that love it. And you're going to park your house wherever you want to and try to skate around the law, or I'll just do it. Like, just don't care what the city says almost. If it's going to be a financial burden, that sucks for you. Listen to them when they say to get out, but just park your house wherever you want to and live in it and enjoy it and love it. And you might have to deal with consequences. You'll have to deal with that old neighbor. But the more people that do that and push and get out there, the more that we're going to be able to do it and pushing it out there and make real changes and real movements inside the movement,
And I know the tiny house people that I know and that I've networked with, we want to live legally. We want to.
Yes.
It's not like you're doing it out of like, ooh, look at me, I'm going to go be right. It's because there are other options, and we've explored those. And I think it's one of those things where, if you build it, they will come, and we will just keep building this movement, and laws will have to change. And we're happy. I sure wouldn't mind. I plan on building a tiny house community. We'll pay our taxes.
Right. For
we
sure.
want to just let us, and we'll do it.
It's not that people wouldn't follow people would follow a clear path to tiny living if there was a clear path to it, and there's just not right now, and it will come. But as far as other options go, you hear that, there's not another option for me. Well, you can rent an apartment. Okay, I'm going to rent an apartment for the rest of 60 years of my life. And in the end, I will have spent with raising prices and all of that stuff. I don't own my own property. I have to deal with all the smells down the hallway. Some of the benefits of I don't have to do maintenance or anything like that. That's
or
pretty
yard
great.
work, or
But now you're locked into this building, and the rich get richer, and the poor stay paying payments. Or you go and you buy an RV, which might suit you, and I'm never saying that any option is wrong. I mean, it's all for you. So you go buy an RV, which is going to cost you more in heating, or maybe you'll have to be, somewhere specific in order to park that. And it's going to be, you might have to remodel it or whatever, and that could be a good option for you too. There's no wrong way to do it. Just get out and do it, I would say, and the more people that we push towards it. And one of the things too is, that's as far as laws and rules and on that topic, you can move and you can get a different job somewhere that is accepting of the movement.
Yes.
Just because you live in Minnesota and the city that you're in, you can move to a different city. Life is too short to not do what you need to do and be held back. You have to get out there and do that stuff. And if there's a place in Colorado, that's the Mecca, or Texas, or, someplace, you might have to go there for 5 more years, or.
And then I'm bringing it back.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you might have to do that now, And I understand that family matters and you're around family, and maybe that's, this ultimately most important thing to you. But find a way. If you're listening to this Sustainable Living podcast, where there's a will, there's a way, and you're going to find it however you need to. And it might look different than what your grand vision is, but you can work towards that grand vision, and maybe you have to start with a different vision and go from there.
Absolutely. And I know for us, we just straight up emailed. We are big hobby farmers, so we just straight up emailed every hobby farm in the state. And we're like, hey, do you want some help? And actually, there's several counties in Minnesota that if you are helping on a farm, they can have one vehicle with someone living there as, the helper. So there are actually legal places to live in Minnesota. You're not going to be close to the city. You might be 30, 45 minutes from the city, but maybe an hour, maybe 2. And there's a tiny house community in several states. So I would look into those as well. And you can even in Minnesota, of course, it's one of those things, the further you get out into the country, there are some zoning that allows tiny houses. We have one tiny house currently in Minnesota that is on legal property she purchased. She was grandfathered into the zoning, and it's only about 45 minutes from the big city, so it's doable. Just you got to search and look and get your network out there. And
you just have to start doing it. It's like, if you build it, they will come. In all of my builds and all of the people, and you yourself, where there's a will, there's a way, and you can manifest it however you want to, use those words. If you start building your tiny house and you start asking around, whether it's a pro build or a DIY, you start talking to the community, you start talking to friends of friends and friends. They're like, hey, my friend is building a tiny house. The last tiny house that we built, she's not on the land that she originally thought she was going to be. She's in a different place because of these circumstances, and talking to these people and those people. And they said, oh, maybe this would be a good choice for you. And there are so many generous people out there that will let you stay on their land, maybe charge you a little bit of something. They still have taxes and all the rest of the stuff too. There's benefits, but you have to start the process. You have to stop just dreaming about it and looking on Pinterest and creating boards, because as you get into it, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a builder. I'm saying that because I believe in it. I believe in the people that are doing it. And there's a lot of people that just go on Facebook and like to contribute to the conversation, but they're not really doing it. And you have to get out there and you have to start. And I believe 99 times out of 100, you'll find what you're looking for. It just might be hidden until you actually go looking. Yes,
I agree. It's a beautiful community. I have yet to meet anyone who everyone is just so amazing in this community. And thank you so much. Now, where can people find you? We want to be sure that they can look up your plans and get an idea of where to find you and what you're doing with the tiny house movement.
Yes, absolutely. MidwestTinyLiving.com is our website. We're on Facebook, MidwestTinyLiving.com. Well, I guess it would be Facebook.com/MidwestTinyLiving. And you can definitely email me. It's just Ryan@Midwest Tiny Living. We're on Instagram and stuff too, so it's pretty much all under Midwest Tiny Living. We just kind of deal with the region. We know our region, our 5 states kind of. Our houses are mobile, so they can go anywhere. but we try to do our best for our little region. We're not trying to be necessarily nationwide, because we feel like there's enough people here that we need to help. And if somebody else wants one, that's great. But we focus on our core area.
And I'll be sure to link all of those links
Cool.
in the podcast so people can find you. And
Awesome.
just for a moving forward, I'm actually going to have one of Ryan's clients on the podcast.
Nice.
And you'll be able to have a 15-minute video tour of her house. So
Whoa.
you will be able to see how amazing these tiny houses can be. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. And now people know where to find you. And thank you for all you do for the tiny house movement. And I can't wait to see what big things are coming for you.
Oh, yeah, I'm super excited. Thanks, Emily.
Wasn't that a great show? I enjoyed it so much, and I learned so much about really thinking about where you're at in the world. And I think this is something we always have to think about with any kind of advice, be it gardening advice, building advice. Where is that person living, or where is their experience based from? What works for somebody in country A doesn't work in country B. Anyways, I really loved it. Hope you did too. We always love your feedback, and you can reach us at sustainablelivingpodcast@gmail.com. That's our email. Obviously, you can go to our website and use the contact us function there, sustainablelivingpodcast.com. And you find us on all different social media. To tell you the truth, I'm mostly on steemit.com right now. That's STEEMIT.com. It's a little bit more of an alternative social media platform, and you actually can earn cryptocurrency via blogging and interacting on that platform. However, we do have an Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, everything. And I'm working very hard on becoming more active there again. So go ahead, message me on any of those. Twitter. Did I say Twitter? We're on Twitter too. Look for Marianne West on Twitter, and I will do my best to answer any input I get from you. Yeah, go ahead. We love to hear from you. Take good care. Until next time.